Hi, everyone. My name's Greg Knight.
I'm Ricardo Avila.
It's time to update our Take 2 promo, and so we've broken out our Gen Z slang machine for Ricardo once again so that he can communicate with the kids.
I hate this.
I know you do. Here we go. The first 100 episodes of our podcast were very different from what we do now.
Those episodes are Ohio AF. You're Delulu if you think anyone stands those pods. You may as well just yeet those things out of here, no cap.
You're right, but we don't want to eliminate our show history. We want to improve it by going back into the raw audio while updating our quality.
That's the vibe. Like you're going to flex those old pods with a bougie glow-up. That low-key slaps, fam. Because right now they're pretty chugi. Good Lord.
Scroll down. Okay. Listen, culture evolves over time, and our spin-off pod, Take 2, gives us the chance to go back and evolve our old podcast right along with it.
That's a bar, chat. I think this idea is pretty lit. It beats having a big yikes sitting in our archives. You gotta bling those things out with some fresh drip if you want that new subs riz, period. God, no wonder the youth are struggling. Go ahead.
So listen to Take 2 in the Popping Collars feed and hear our past selves grow before your very ears.
Yeah, these pods are bussin'. You got a dub with this, plus 1,000 aura. This idea is giving. You ate.
I wonder what would happen if we changed the slang machine to the millennial setting.
Get in, loser. We're going podcasting.
Okay, that makes sense. Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Knight, and this is the Popping Collars Pilgrimage Project, a Popping Collars side pod where my co-host Ryan Parker and I attempt to walk around the world, or at least Spain. This month, we've got a special interview with Sean Small, the executive director of Voyage, a company that organizes pilgrimages and mission trips for various religious groups around the country. Sean and I first got to know each other way back in 2019 or so, when I had originally planned to hike a pilgrimage in southern France with my youth group at the time. Unfortunately, COVID put a stop to those plans, but we were able to come back together for a pilgrimage on the Camino Inglés, a short, approximately 100-kilometer Camino from Ferrol, Spain, to Santiago de Compostela in 2022. And as you'll hear in this pod, Sean helped coordinate our youth pilgrimage to Trondheim, Norway in the summer of 2024. Voyage has been operating for 25 years, which makes Sean the perfect person to talk to for this pod, as he has seen up close and personal the growth in pilgrim participation in the 21st century. He has a lot of thoughts on that, as well as the spiritual benefits of pilgrimage work, especially with young people. Sean is also the author of the book Into the Wonder, which you can hear us talk about in more detail in the Popping Collars archives if you go back to July 2024. So let's get into it. This is Ryan and me talking to Sean Small from Voyage.
Modern life can be a blur. Our daily lives move from one task to another, barely catching our breath between each obligation. What kind of existence has modern man created, where we zoom through time and miss the moments that give us life? Each one of us longs for peace and silence and beauty and wonder. But do we place a value on those longings? These arches took millions of years to form. Through wind and rain, heat and cold, erosion and time, a masterpiece was created. Often we wonder, why can't we hear God speak? Or why can't we hear the Creator? God speaks to us constantly, but we speed ahead. We never stop long enough to think, or listen, or really hear. Is there a way to get unstuck? A way to see clearly through the blur? Take some time. At Wonder Voyage, we long to give you time to explore with childlike abandon, time to see the wonder that's around us, time to be still and know God.
I will say, we had you on the show about a year ago to talk about Into the Wonder, your book that you released, and we talked a little bit about how Wonder Voyage started and stuff, but just to recap for the audience, when did you start Wonder Voyage? How did you start it? And what is Wonder Voyage?
All right. So after 10 years of youth work and missions work in both a mega church and in a kind of normal sized church, I realized going out, probably 1993 was the first time I took a group out, and it was more of a missions trip. But the way that from the beginning, so I had a couple of people in my life that were very influential in how I framed what I did. And the 90s were like that really kind of ultra radical missions, kind of everything that was going on around the teen mania and all the big stuff was a real turnoff to me. It just didn't seem real. It didn't seem right. It was definitely not sustainable. It was very colonial. Go in, strip what you can, and get out.
Yeah,
and I had
paint a wall that somebody else has already painted. Yeah,
we knew one church where it had happened 7 times in one summer, and the couple of people that were very influential in my life taught me a different way to do it, and I had avoided traveling with youth. And we did a trip to New Orleans where we lived in the Fisher Projects, which was a big no-no. And it was life-changing. I know we throw that word around a lot. But then I went to Guatemala, and we lived with an indigenous group up in the mountains for 2.5 weeks with a group of students. And it was way more, we were in a place of learning rather than what can we bring you? We were just getting so much out of it. Developed that over several years and realized it was, to me, getting out and leading groups out on these trips, which turned out to be way more narrative focused, pilgrimage focused, learning focused, culturally, like really diving deep in culture. And remember that it was not happening it probably still isn't in a lot of programs today. It was like that was the actual laboratory. It's like 51 weeks of the year in church was classroom, and then we were actually living in a way that was authentic and real, and we just saw so much growth to the point that I was taking, as a youth minister, 3 or 4 trips a year out all over the world. My first trip to Ireland was 1996, and I read How the Irish Saved Civilization by Thomas Cahill. And it has a pretty good understanding and history of how pilgrimage started in the Celtic world. And I gravitated to the word pilgrimage through that book and started doing a deep dive. So my last year's up to 1998, 1999 in kind of parish work. I was absorbing all of that. And when I left the church world as a minister on staff, I was 30 and I thought, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I had nothing. Yeah. So there was nothing to lose. I mean, I did have small children, and my wife was very supportive. And after a year of soul searching and a little bit of experimenting, we launched Wonder Voyage. So Wonder Voyage was kind of the mixture. It's a hybrid in many ways of traditional missions and pilgrimage. Well, there was nobody doing pilgrimage back then. Still not really today. You have individuals that will lead pilgrimages, but most of the organizations today, back then for sure, there were a few big ones. You worked with some of them, were really travel agencies that got locals who may or may not understand pilgrimage to lead the group. And we wanted to create a nonprofit organization that was really on the journey of what pilgrimage is. you guys, your project is about the traditional long-term pilgrim's walk, but that is not what I absorbed at the beginning. The fact that Wonder Voyage started in Ireland, that I worked on my degree in Celtic Christianity, the Celtic pilgrimage it's a different animal than the long walk pilgrimage, which again has been around through history for thousands of years in every religion, right? But the Celtic ones, the pilgrimage routes we'd walk on that would sometimes be 4 hours or maybe 12 hours, maybe a couple of days. You don't have a lot of place to walk like in Ireland. You can make it across the country in about 4 days walking. Pilgrimage was definitely more not just a physical walk, but there was a narrative behind it. And that's how Wonder Voyage started. The actual term Wonder Voyage, I'll finish this question with this. Wonder Voyage it's the anglicized version of an Irish word called Imrama. Imramas were Celtic, so this is pre-Christian, Celtic tales of pilgrimage, where a hero or group of heroes would go on a journey that they didn't quite know how it was going to end. So there's a whole set of Celtic tales called Imramas. When Patrick came in, it was decades before the Irish were now doing their Imramas, again, Wonder Voyages, where there would come a point where they would take their boat and aim for a place where they knew the word of Christ had not been spread. They would aim for that place, like Iona, and head out there, and wherever they landed, that's where the Wonder Voyage ended. That's where the Imrama ended, and they would establish a base there. But they would consider everything they were doing from that point part of that pilgrimage. Long answer to a short question.
But it's great. And you actually got to my follow-up question, which was going to be, what is pilgrimage? But, it's fascinating, right? Because, and I wonder about this too, when you're talking about Wonder Voyages and Imrama, especially that concept, I love that concept. It almost, the way that you were setting up, I was like, oh, it almost sounds like you're talking about a vision quest. Like that's what we would say with like indigenous peoples here in America. But that's really about going out and seeing what is going to come to you rather than going out and seeing what it is that you can bring to the world. I wonder if like pilgrimage can exist in both of these camps in your experience.
I think they do. I mean, we're constantly we tell people, listen, we don't do mission trips. We do pilgrimages where you have an opportunity to serve. And it is more about what you're going to meet when you're out there, who you're going to meet, and what you're going to discover about yourself than it will ever be to what you can bring. We can bring great things to these places we go. But there's just no way that it can compare to what we're going to walk away from. I mean, I know your story intimately, and we've been, you made a tactical choice as a youth minister to focus on pilgrimage because you saw what the end results were, and nothing is ever predictable in that. And that's very thrilling. Yeah, so it was a little bit easier for us. Yes, we do traditional walking pilgrimages. On your last episode, you were talking about, Ryan was talking about that tension you have when you've walked the whole Camino, which I've had several of my staff people do that. And then it's that last 100 kilometers and you're like, I remember one time, I hope this isn't too crude for what you were saying. I may have told you this story, but we were within, let's say, an hour of getting to Santiago to the cathedral. Got big thunderstorms here. I don't know.
I heard it. Yeah.
Wow, that was like a real dramatic to what I'm about to say. It's not that dramatic. So we're walking down that hill that you kind of walk. It's the hill that kind of angles down into Santiago, and this German guy comes and he's carrying his 80-pound pack. He's a big dude, and he's like skipping along, all happy, singing in German. We're exhausted. And my friend turns to me and goes, I speak German. Do you know what he's saying? And I go, no. He goes, I'm an asshole. I'm an asshole. I'm an asshole. It was like, this guy didn't walk 500 kilometers he didn't walk 700 kilometers. So yes, there's that tension. But with the Celtic pilgrimage, it was more about revealing a story.
Yeah.
And so you really can have a pilgrimage in a few hours if you go to Croagh in the west of Ireland, and it's the mountain that Patrick traditionally prayed, kind of spiritual warfare that drove the snakes from Ireland. We take that with every group. That is a pilgrimage that lasts about 5 hours.
He tells us that his father was a deacon, that his grandfather was a priest. He was brought up in a small estate in which they had many servants, so he had quite a well-to-do background, and that at the age of 16, a raiding party came from Ireland, and he, as he said, thousands of others, maybe an exaggeration, were actually enslaved from Roman Britain and brought to Ireland. And he is working in Ireland for some years before he is able to escape. And it's only when he's in Ireland that he actually comes to know God, and he tells that himself. So when he actually gets back to England, very naturally his parents don't want him to go back to Ireland, but he tells us that he has this vision in which this figure called Victor comes with these letters that say, this is the voice of the Irish asking you to walk amongst us once again. So he decides to return to Ireland against his family's wishes, and he knows it's a very hard station, it's a very, very difficult mission, and he goes back to Ireland sort of almost as a self-imposed exile this time.
So it was easy for us to start framing these journeys into that narrative to get away from the tourist side. And I'm telling you, when a lot of people sign up with us, especially at the beginning, we're like, they say they want pilgrimage. They just really want a nice vacation.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll turn people away. If we know that's kind of where they're at, we turn them away. So it's a little bit different than the project. By the way, thrilled with the project you guys are doing. I cannot wait. I want to continue to be actively a part of this. It's just amazing because nobody's doing what you're doing.
Thanks. We've got a Kickstarter coming out pretty soon. So I'll send it your way. I actually have another question, but Ryan, I just wanted to check in with you. Do you have something?
Yeah, I do. Sorry. I'm intrigued by this idea. You guys have talked about kind of your experiences of transforming mission trips or youth ministry, so to speak. There's this idea that the definition of pilgrimage isn't singular. I wonder if you could talk about the ways that you've seen Camino change, because you've heard us talk about people participate in these. They'll walk the entire Camino for not specifically religious reasons, but for profoundly spiritual reasons. And I wonder what your take on that is, what your experience of that is.
It's funny, Ryan, because I don't see an issue with that. To me, I've seen a lot of people go for religious reasons and they walk away empty. I've seen people go with no thought of spirituality and have these profound moments. I think for us, it's the realization of kind of getting into a rhythm wherever that is, whatever that is, where the heart is open, where there's connection. We'll talk about, one of the questions you had given me ahead of time is why is pilgrimage, and it really is, starting to grow pretty rapidly post-COVID here. We can talk about that, but Ryan, I think it's what we try, even with the groups that we take out, is to get people in understand. The reason I love pilgrimage is because whether it lasts several months or several hours, it's a narrative that speaks to faith. It's our faith journey is a narrative. And I think, when we take groups out, we're really looking for them to connect into a bigger narrative, something about journey, something that they can carry with them, again, in miniature or in, a meta narrative for a long journey. I'm probably not really answering your question
No,
clearly.
you are. I wanted to. That may be leading the witness here, but like, I wonder if there's a sense of, especially for younger people, and Greg, you can speak to this too, better than I can. Like, it feels like there are people who are participating in the Camino, or like there's this trend and this desire for experience, and I think buried in that desire for experience is something authentic, or like an authentic connection. I think kids, certainly older people, a lot of people are realizing that like social media is bankrupt. It's not like giving them what their heart craves. So I just wonder if y'all could speak to that in terms of kind of maybe not even generational, but just the desire for something. Sean, you touched on that a little bit, like opening up your heart and having these experiences. I just wonder if there's more there.
Yeah, I would just jump into that and just say, one of the things that you're talking about, Sean, that I think is nailing what it is that Ryan's talking about is this idea of story. It's this idea that, young people, everybody really, but especially sort of seekers, and especially we're seeing more younger and younger people want to be part of an epic story. Right. And I think that's the gift of pilgrimage, is that you are invited into not only history, but you're invited into culture, you're invited into mystery. You don't know what's going to happen the next day. And what happens the next day may be the best story that's ever happened in your life.
Oh, I would agree. Listen, experiences, I think you're right, Ryan. I think we're now seeing, a decade and a half or almost 2 decades of soul draining social media. And I'm not an anti-social media person, but the experiential thing is kind of all around, right? Now these 4D theaters are showing up where your chair shakes and you can have, you can have smells, and that with the conferences that people are going to are hey, if you can dress up as your favorite character. I know it's just that everyone is trying to get more experiential, and it is in the travel industry in general. If you notice, like if you ever do Airbnb, you can of course get your Airbnb, but you can also get the experiences in the area. I think we're just hungry for actually something real. Not that even any of that stuff is real, but it's just we're on this journey to try to touch the earth. I always said, after a couple of safaris, it ruined it for zoos for me. Like I get no joy out of going to a zoo when I've been on these amazing safaris around the world, or there's just places I've been that kind of take away other long things that I used to like, that I'm like, I'm just not into that because I've been there. And I think with our spirituality, that's at the core of our being. So somebody who says, well, I'm not going on this, I'm not doing the Camino for a religious reason. I just want to connect with nature. Well, that is a religious reason. That's exactly what that is.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to put the term on it, but there's also, I saw this. I think this is relevant to what we're talking about. There was an article this week in Vox about Gen Z's return to religion, which I mean, it may be too early to say that that's a trend, because the trend of decline, we've got more data on that. We've got a longer span of time to look at that. But it is interesting that there are these conversations about this generation, or that generation particularly, returning to religion at the same time as you see this rise in interest in what we're talking about, connection, experience, things like that.
Sean, I wanted to ask you really quickly, and this is actually one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show, because you're exposed to so many different sort of unique pilgrimage experiences. Ryan and I are looking at these walking pilgrimages, the Camino, the Shikoku, Norway, all of this stuff, because it's kind of a sexy draw for media, right? You're able to get out there, film like all of this gorgeous stuff, meet all of these amazing people, stuff like that. I imagine, though, that your experience with pilgrimage and all of the diversity that comes with that word that we've talked about so far, you've probably seen some things. So what are some of the more kind of out of the box pilgrimage experiences that you've been able to host as part of Wonder Voyage?
Oh man. So whenever we take out about 60 trips a year, And we automatically ask each group, like, what is it that you want to get accomplished here? What's the goal? So one of the most unique ones is we have a church down in Dallas here, Church of the Transfiguration. Casey Shobe is the rector, good friend of mine. And they focus every couple of years on metamorphosis during Easter. So that's a big focus of theirs. And they use the monarch butterfly as kind of their symbol of that. They actually have a big butterfly garden in the kind of the churchyard for the migration. We're in the migration path here in Dallas of the monarchs. So about every 3 years, we bring a group of their adults down to Mexico to experience that migration. And everything is built around that narrative. And these are older folks, but there is always walking in this because you're out in the middle of mountains. So, or horseback riding, or it's just crazy the things these people will do to get out to these butterflies. And you think, well, it's butterflies. We learn all about that journey. But I will just say this. I had never done it before. I went this year, and there was a point that it was me and one guide standing for probably 15 minutes with 100,000 monarchs.
Wow.
Around us, all over, flying around. Maybe one of the most profound religious moments of my life.
When the sun warms their bodies above 13 degrees centigrade, they start to fly. More than 100 million take to the air. It's the biggest gathering of butterflies in the world. They're getting ready for a long and arduous journey. They're all going in search of one very special plant. And it only flowers in spring. Milkweed. The butterflies won't lay their eggs on any other plant, so they must time their wake-up perfectly for when the milkweed blooms. Generations of butterflies fly nearly 5,000 kilometers to Canada, carefully following the flowering of this one particular plant. It's the greatest insect migration on Earth, and it only starts when the sun wakes them up in spring.
And I was like, oh, I get it. So we have those kind of things. I mean, we have traditional, like the Borders Abbey Way, which is 100 kilometers. It's just a circle of abbeys that we will take teams, and like the Camino, it's as long as a short Camino, and you get your certificate. We follow along that up and down little towns through Scotland into England, back up to Scotland. We have groups that will be very focused on maybe a cultural aspect. I've done jazz pilgrimages before. I've done art pilgrimages. It's kind of whatever the DNA is of that community. We try to create something specific. So you kind of get the idea that but kind of focusing them in on a narrative and as a journey, which means we have to be very intentional each day of what we're doing. And we do try to get a couple days of walking in a lot of these. If there is especially in the UK, we try to get a couple days in along a very historical pilgrim's path, just to give them 8 hours. What would it have been like to walk, from Cornwall to Canterbury? What would that have been like? Or, we try to build that in where we can, where there's a team that really can absorb that. And those days tend to be the ones they remember, the ones, for whatever reason, the ones that are the least programmed, but you're walking. I mean, I can't tell you, when we do the Holy Isle pilgrimage up in Lindisfarne, we almost always take our kids along the pilgrim's route from the mainland across the waters, which have now receded, onto Holy Island. So that pilgrimage is 2.5 hours, and we're very intentional and focused about that. And there's always a profoundness to it, something in that. There's posts that go all along that way. I don't know if either one of you guys have done that one before, but there's posts that lead the pilgrims all the way through. Because when the water's up, it's up at about 8 feet. And then when it's down, you're barely any water there. And we'll have them go along and pray at each of those posts. So 80 posts, they're going along. Man, it leaves this deep impression. And there's something about walking along the path that pilgrims have walked for hundreds of years. I don't know. There's something psychic in the soil or something. I don't know how to put that. There's something mystical about that.
Hey, Sean, I like your idea of alternative pilgrimages. I'm based in Mississippi. We got to get you to set up some blues pilgrimages and some civil rights pilgrimages.
We do a lot of civil rights already down there. What's amazing, though, is we set it up like a pilgrimage, like you're talking about. And most of the churches we deal with, mostly Episcopal churches, they don't want that. They want to be in a really nice air-conditioned bus going from monument to monument and not actually walk a journey and learn. They want to kind of experience a little thing here, a little thing here. We actually won't take groups if they're not kind of willing to launch out in that way. And Greg knows, we've worked with Greg for years. He's one of my favorite guys to work with because of you instantly understood that. So when your kids came out on walking pilgrimages, we could dive pretty deep really fast, and they knew this was going to be uncomfortable, and this was going to hurt, and we could soften that up at the end of the day for them in wherever we stopped. But man, I think it's more of a mindset, right, and a heart attitude rather than a literal walk or a destination.
I have a question, Sean, and this may sound like a silly question, but it's something that Ryan and I talked about on our last episode, and I think it's really important. Does pilgrimage require intention? Like, do you need to be intentional about what you're doing and why if you're on pilgrimage?
I think if you're using the term pilgrimage, yes, you need intention, right? Don't use that word unless there is intention. I remember, you guys, I listened to that episode yesterday, and I completely agreed with everything you said. It happens that sometimes people will stumble into an experience, especially along the Camino, with no intention. And at the end, they're like, I guess I was on a pilgrimage. I didn't realize I was. So there are certain places with that mystical energy, that where you bump into enough people, as Ryan said, you bump into enough people who are like, this is the reason I'm here, to start going, maybe I should have a reason I'm here. We're the largest organization of what we do in the world, bar none. I just don't know of anyone else who's doing what we do. But man, getting people to understand even the term pilgrimage with what they've kind of labeled it with, that takes a few weeks to even decide whether this is going to be a good partnership or not. If they totally don't have an understanding of, we just had a group that got back from Spain. We built a pilgrimage, and when it was all said and done, and we talked about the intentionality of it, what we're doing. We were, going from Madrid down to Avila, and then, what else am I missing? Toledo. And when it was all said and done, they're like, man, we really wanted nicer hotels. We really the leaders of the group were like, the students loved it, but that's, this is what we wanted. And we're like, yeah, you shouldn't have we actually said, you probably shouldn't go out with us anymore because, and amazingly enough, Antonio led that one, Antonio, and he led a profound kind of moment of wonder outside of Toledo, giving the story of St. Therese, or outside of Avila, giving the story of St. Therese, which all the students said, that hour was their favorite of the whole thing. The teachers were like, it was pretty good, but hotel rooms are a lot nicer than monasteries.
Do you think this is an American thing? Just, the
pilgrimage
idea that when we travel, we need to make everything like it is back home.
It's a Western thing, so I'm going to give it to Europe too. So yeah, but definitely way more American because we know like the term hostel, staying in a hostel, like what you're going to do on the Camino. Half the Americans are like, I saw that movie and it didn't turn out well. Where for Europeans, that's a normal thing. It's what you do with your family. It's where you would go. It's way more community based for most other cultures rather than us.
Yeah, I will ashamedly say that I did the Camino Inglés with our group at one point, and arriving at the cathedral was all fine and good. But when those kids saw their first McDonald's in Spain, you would think that was where we were walking to the entire time.
We've had that experience where we took a group of kids out to the Grand Canyon. They had never been out there. They were from the East Coast, and they got out to the Grand Canyon. And I think it lasts about 10 minutes. They're like, okay, we got it. We understand it. So we're like, okay, let's go to lunch. And we went to lunch to Jack in the Box, and they were enthralled. They had never seen Jack in the Box. And I just sat there like, what? Usually, you know what, though? I think maybe you can echo this. It's not youth that we struggle with. Youth are open to wonder, and it's usually adults along the journey that can hinder or don't think that their youth are going to be open, which we already know they will be. We know they'll embrace pilgrimage.
I think Greg and I have talked about this before. The kind of helicopter parents, could potentially get in the way of this. Well, they're not going to have their cell phones. Well, how am I going to get in touch with them? Well, you're not. Like, they're going to be, they're going to be on this amazing journey, which, as you suggested, and Greg has told me, they're really open to. Maybe after the first day.
Let's get to the big why. I mean, this is really the whole point of the project, and it's something that I feel like you have a unique perspective on as someone who's been in this business now for 25 years, which is where Ryan and I have been sort of tracking the growth of pilgrimage, the exponential growth of pilgrimage. Now, obviously, like the Camino and stuff has been showing sort of steady growth since the late 80s. But the fact that it's been doubling, tripling numbers of people. And then you and I had the benefit of walking a trail that's sort of a burgeoning trail in Norway that they're trying to pump more life into and get more people out there. What is the call of the Pilgrim Trail, and why is it that people are craving this experience?
Well, there's four distinct reasons, and you guys have actually throughout this series hit on all these reasons. I think you're right on track. We were at our peak growth in probably 2019. 2020 was going to be a huge year for us. We normally take out 60 trips. I think that year we had maxed out at about 85, which was insane. We know COVID hits and it just throws chaos into the whole thing. So we've been slowly rebuilding by that. We're still, we're up to maxing out at about 60 trips a year at this point. That's what we do. But the other side of COVID, and especially with the Camino, anything where you could, it's the same thing that happened kind of in a secular way with national parks in the U.S. Anything where you could distance, I mean, for the 2 years, 3 years after COVID, you sometimes couldn't get into a national park. It was maxed out, right? Because people could be away from each other and in the midst of this. And that's what hit with the Camino. But there are four kind of specific reasons that we are seeing a huge insurgence in faith-based travel, in walking trips, things like that. Number one is there's a real thrust in global wellness. Like post-pandemic, people are really thinking about physical, emotional, spiritual sustainability. It's changed to people being trapped in a home and really seeing what that trapped and then seeing what freedom looks like. So that global wellness, I mean, that's happening across like markets and everything. This kind of travel plays right into that. So that's huge. And that is a kind of a thing that companies everywhere are trying to grab a hold of. It just pilgrimage. Where do you find all of those things coming together in such an easy way? You said this last time, accessibility. Accessibility is like never before. And that's awesome. And it's sad. And countries are starting to wrestle with how do we deal with this. We just did a pilgrimage up in Bhutan, going to Buddhist monasteries, and we actually did a kind of a 14-mile track over a mountain and everything. But Bhutan, they'll say X amount of people a year is who can come in. And so you continue to have a feeling of pilgrimage there, where the Camino, I can get some of the frustration that people will run into. Though they don't understand historic pilgrimage, which was hundreds or thousands of people at times on roads going in, from the beginning kind of thing. Right. So accessibility. Number 3 is putting kind of wanting to get out into nature, that it's people are there's a spiritual connection you get being out in nature. No doubt. Whether you believe in God or not, it doesn't matter. There is a connection, some sort of mystical, spiritual connection in nature. You don't get that better than on a pilgrimage to Norway. Like you said, when we walked to Norway, you're walking St. Olaf's Way. So we did this, but you're really just out in the trees going, I see why they worship the trees. Like, I get it. Ireland, was you understood why they worshiped the sun when the sun came out in Ireland. So global wellness, accessibility, the connection to nature, which is a real longing right now. And then kind of the core, which is meaning, something with meaning, something that allows self-discovery. Of course, that's how we've done our trips for years is based on that. But I think there is a definite, even across the board globally, this longing for meaning as we slowly lose meaning in politics and social media and everything we're kind of thrust into.
My name is Chanel Noss. I'm from the States, originally from California, now living in Virginia. I just turned 40 on the Camino. And I just finished the Camino Frances, starting in Saint Jean on June 10th. Today is day 45 for me.
Could you briefly describe your experience on the Camino?
Magical, enchanting. It felt like a rebirth is the best way I can describe it.
Okay, let's start with what did actually motivate you to walk the Camino?
I think my soul had been searching for something like this for a long time. I heard some dear friends telling me about the Camino because they had done it a couple of years back. And as soon as they were telling me the stories, I knew that was what I needed to do. And I never knew when it was going to happen. I just knew it was going to at some point. And I decided to take an opportunity with work and ask for a 3-month sabbatical. And if it wasn't granted, I was going to leave because I needed to do it right now. So within a month of making the decision, I was here in Spain and finally pursuing what my soul had been hungry for so long.
Hearing those
that longing for meaning and wanting to do something that remember you were talking about the girl who was like 4 weeks ago we decided to go on the Camino. Part of that, I would guess, part of that kind of not really thinking it through is a sense of we got to do something that's a little more meaningful. And that's where you get the experience side too. What's something we can do that we can afford that gives us meaning and experience, not pay $1,000 to get in a hot air balloon over Africa. Or you can pay for a lot of experiences that are insane, but man, I've never had a deeper experience living off of $15 a day, walking 70 miles somewhere or 100 miles somewhere. That's the deepest level of experience that you can get.
Hey, Sean, I think one other thing, it ties into a lot of those, but if you've heard on previous episodes, I've had a privilege and opportunity to travel quite a bit. And when I look back on my life, and especially when I'm talking about with my wife, we're about to approach our 20th anniversary. And we've realized that travel experiences have been kind of key markers of time for us in our life. And like when I did the Camino, that was after my father had passed away. My wife had just finished grad school. Like it was a time for us to reconnect too. That was kind of our intention. And so, we look ahead at our life. My wife's back in school. But what are we going to do when she finishes? Probably go take another pilgrimage to kind of mark time, So I think it may work that way for other people, but that's certainly something that we talk about a lot.
I love that. Marking of time is. I'm taking a note right now. So I put it down here.
That's huge. Yeah.
Most of the groups we take out, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to mark a season for those students.
Do you think, I loved your list, Sean. Do you think it is a reaction to technology and the trap that this can be for us sometimes? I'm holding up my phone to the people listening. Or do you think that technology has actually spurred interest in this stuff because people are exposed to stories that they see on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever?
Absolutely both. That is ironic as can be. That yes, we're spurred on because of course what we see of what and that's probably going to be through social media. But at the same time, we are trying to escape that vapid, thin world of social media. Though, when you like seeing a group of kids like yours who go out, who don't have their phones, who walk for 8 hours. We talked about this. You and I talked about the conversations were you've taken the blockade out of the way. That's hard to be intentional if you're out by yourself. If you've got a couple of people or you're out by yourself. I think we're still seeing that question being uncovered. Give us another 10 years and we may know more. But I would agree with your theory that it's yes and both on those things.
Yeah. Let me wrap up with this because you've given us a lot of your time, and I really appreciate you talking to us for this hour. Just a quick question: if someone is just on the fence about I keep hearing about this pilgrimage thing, but I don't know if it's for me or whatever. What are the gifts that you see as a result of pilgrimage that you've seen over the last 25 years of doing this?
Anytime you can get out somewhere different. And let me give you a unique pilgrimage that I've been doing for years. This is the wildest one. About every year or two, I go to New York City, and I have walked every single street from the southern tip of Manhattan up to 80th Street over 10 years. When I do it, I am quiet. I am prayerful. Whenever I get to a green space, which are quite often, I'll have a very specific kind of practice I'll put in place for that. The reason I love pilgrimage is because it grounds me. It brings me back to those things that are most important. It allows me to think, to be free, to get away from the trappings that I find myself in quite easily in life. Broadening my heart and my mind to the world around me is priceless. To hear other people's opinions, their thoughts. I've been asked I've been to 108 countries, and people are like, do you ever feel scared? Only twice. But for the most part, I find people are kind, friendly. I gain wisdom when I'm out there. I'm a journaler, so I'm journaling everything while I'm out there. Getting answers to things that have been caught up in the brain for who knows how long. Understanding what's very important about life and what isn't important. Getting perspective in that way. The health benefits of me just getting out and being able, man, it hurts to walk, 70 miles, but man, do you feel amazing afterwards. On all those reasons. And for me, there's a side of getting time alone with Jesus for me, just being quiet. And that is who my walking partner is, that just being able to walk along and talk and listen and hear. And I don't know how it's so much a part of who I am now. I don't know how I would operate. I actually get scared sometimes thinking, what if I wasn't able to do the physicality of this? And there'll come a day. But it is, to me, the number one grounding truth in my life is a life of pilgrimage.
Sean, when you, I want to elevate one thing that you said, but before I do that, if you can't walk it anymore, we're going to give a tease for our next episode. You can find somebody that'll push you. One of the things I want to say about pilgrimage and travel in general is when my wife and I spent a year traveling around the world, when we told people that we were going to do that, the majority response that we got is, but you're not afraid?
Yeah.
And I think Americans need to see more people. We need to see other people. And that of overcoming fear, we have a pandemic of fear in this country. And travel eradicates that. That was Bourdain's gift to the world, right? And I think a gift to a lot of Americans, certainly to us, that to echo your point, people are overwhelmingly kind and hospitable and the same. We want to make sure that we have a roof over our head, we can provide for our children, and that there is interest in encountering the other, and the gifts that come out of that are immeasurable. So,
Ryan, I love your term, and I think it would maybe a good title for a book, by the way, Encountering the Other. I think that is one of the greatest gifts we can get. I love it. Encountering the Other.
Sean Small, thank you so much. Author of Into the Wonder, executive director of Wonder Voyage, a company that puts together pilgrimages for groups around the country. Thank you so much for joining us on the Pilgrimage Project.
Oh, I will. I am a fan, and yes, I will give money when you finally get that Kickstarter started.
We're close. We are hyper focused on the Camino right now. That is our proof of concept. Once we get that in the books, then I'm sure everything else will come out of it. But thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Do the walk of love.